We start out our 4 p.m. newscast with the deadly mass shooting in Texas, where 19 children and 2 adults were killed at an elementary school yesterday. The victims have now been identified, but many questions still remain about the shooter. Thank you for watching Denver 7 News at 4. I'm Micah Smith. As law enforcement continues to investigate this horrific act of violence, the national conversation is once again focusing on gun control. CNN's Chris Wynn joins us live.
And we're learning new details about the gunman. Law enforcement officials say he was a high school dropout who lived with his grandmother. Tonight, the governor of Texas placing the blame for the shooting on mental health. What should have been a joyous day just before summer break turned into a nightmare when 19 children and 2 teachers were shot and killed at Robb Elementary on Tuesday. Families, instead of planning vacations, are now planning funerals.
Evil swept across Uvalde yesterday.
These are the faces of just some of the victims. 4th grade teacher Eva Mireles, 10-year-old Amary Jo Garza, 10-year-old Jose Flores, and Javier Lopez smiling here after making honor roll that morning.
Teacher got hit.
The suspected gunman is an 18-year-old who police say shot his grandmother before going to the school and opening fire on a 4th grade class.
He was dropped out of school. He had no criminal history that we've been able to find.
As the community grapples with this horrific tragedy, the conversation in Washington turns to curbing gun violence.
Our country is sickened and outraged by the senseless evil that struck Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas.
One nation under guns. It doesn't have to be that way. Our parents don't need to drop their kids off at school and wonder if their kid will be next.
Many now wondering whether these words from politicians will be turned into action. And we can tell you that a memorial has been set up at the First State Bank of Uvalde for the families of the victims. Reporting live tonight, I'm Chris Wynn. Back to you.
Now, this is the deadliest school shooting since the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School almost 10 years ago. And since then, many Americans have criticized Congress for failing to pass any meaningful gun control laws. The House did recently pass bills that would expand the review period for gun buyers and require background checks for sales at gun shows. But the Senate will almost certainly block them.
What are we doing? Why do you spend all this time running for the United States Senate? Why do you go through all the hassle of getting this job, of putting yourself in a position of authority? If your answer is that as this slaughter increases, as our kids run for their lives, we do nothing.
Republican Senator Ted Cruz says restricting weapons is not the answer. Cruz has also received more direct donations from gun rights groups than any other current member of Congress.
That doesn't work. It's not effective. It doesn't prevent crime. We know what does prevent crime, which is going after felons and fugitives and those with serious mental illness, arresting them, prosecuting them when they try to illegally buy firearms.
19 states, including Colorado, have red flag laws. Those allow authorities to take guns away from people considered a threat to themselves or the public. Texas does not have a red flag law, and in the last 2 years, state lawmakers have actually loosened gun restrictions. Here in Colorado, leaders have spent decades trying to find ways to prevent gun violence. Nicoletti Flatter Associates is a group in Lakewood dedicated to preventing mass shootings. They are teaching first responders, educators, and mental health providers in Colorado about the warning signs that come before a violent attack.
The idea that if we build awareness and competency, so awareness among everyone, competency among professionals about how to deal with these issues, when you see warning signs, when you do need to involve someone beyond yourself, then basically you build a system that is sustainable. You know, all educators, mental health providers, law enforcement would have training in this.
Colorado has tools available for anyone to use, such as the state's Safe to Tell program. The program allows students, parents, even community members to report threats and concerns anonymously. Reports can be submitted on the program's website, safetotell.org.
Our thoughts are with all those affected by this horrific attack.
Pranto per la strage nella scuola elementare in Texas.
This is terrible. To have victims of shooters in peaceful times.
From the Vatican to Ukraine, the entire world is mourning with the United States over the elementary school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. Now, you've probably seen hashtags on social media like words enough trending. Like in the past, the debate is on as to how to stop these shootings from happening in the future, and much of that debate is around guns. Now, since the shooting, 2 bills have already been placed on the Senate's calendar for consideration. Both deal with background checks. One would expand them to be required on all firearms sales, including at gun shows and in the various ways that guns can be bought online. Now, supporters of those bills say these are loopholes that need to close. The other bill would extend the background check time period from 3 days to 10 days. Right now, someone can buy a gun if a background check can't be finished in 3 days. Now, similar measures did pass the House in 2021, but they faced tough battles in the Senate.
But this is ultimately up to voters. I mean, voters get to decide this. Ask your candidates this fall. Are you supportive of universal background checks? Do you think that 18-year-olds should have access to military-style assault weapons? And if they say yes, if they support the current law, if they don't support reform, then don't send them back to Congress.
There hasn't been a single of these mass shootings that have been purchased at a gun show or on the internet. So if people want to do that, we can have that debate, but don't link it to these horrible events because they would have nothing to do with it.
Now, in the Senate, at least 10 Republican votes are needed to avoid a filibuster. One area of possible compromise could be around red flag legislation that allows firearms to be taken from someone suffering a mental health crisis. Nearly half of states have adopted red flag laws, some with bipartisan support. Texas isn't one of them.
Now to a battle over a plot of land in Denver's Globeville neighborhood. It's heating up this week. Neighbors living near 4601 Washington Street were hoping to turn a parcel of land into a park. But the land is owned by CDOT, and tomorrow the department will auction it off to the highest bidder. Neighbors say this is unfair, and they hope to build a park to help filter out some of the pollution from I-70 traffic just a few feet away.
I'm suffering. I mean, it started during the pandemic. I was spending more time at home. So my headaches they started to develop. And as I would leave to the city to go to work, or I would go to a park, they would kind of go away.
We reached out to CDOT for comment. We'll have their response to the land sale coming up at 6.
The head of the FDA says there is no evidence of any intentional delays or misconduct in the agency's slow response to issues at the Abbott formula plant. Now, that plant shut down and contributed to the baby formula shortage that we are seeing today. But he told Congress today that he's putting someone in charge of reviewing the FDA's systems and improving future decision making.
This is where Dr. Solomon, who's a truth teller in the FDA and well known by everyone, will lead an effort to help us get the processes corrected.
Now, Dr. Stephen Solomon knows about the regulatory process with the FDA. The FDA commissioner says more funding from Congress could help avoid future supply chain disruptions like the current one we are seeing with this baby formula shortage. At least one member of Congress told him it is not enough to just throw money at the problem. Well, there's now a Federal Trade Commission investigation into this baby formula shortage. The agency wants to look into if there were any fraudulent or unfair business practices aimed at taking advantage of families. It also wants to uncover weaknesses within the formula supply chain and whether mergers within the industry contributed to this. Now, 2 years after George Floyd's death, activists are laying the framework for the next phase of our country's social justice movement.
In what we're doing, they see the longevity and sustainability of it, and they want to support it. And honestly, that's a good feeling.
How these plywood murals are finding a new home and the healing they could bring nationwide.
And President Biden taking steps to reform police departments at the national level. Hear about the new executive order he signed after the break.